the White Horse Patrol will be right after the parade up in the football field for free. I'd like to have everybody go up and have a look. And the parade is due to start in about 10 minutes. But with 300 entries, it may be a little later. Thank you. Don't forget the Heritage Village. It'll be open all afternoon. It's right up Block North. And immediately after the parade will be the White Horse Patrol. Up at the schoolhouse, in the football field, for free. That's down there at that stand. See that gal sitting in there? Information stand. Yeah, thank you. on East Street. They talk about being 300 entries. Ronnie Cowan. Has anybody seen him this morning? According to the clock, it's time for the parade. Not yet, huh? Beneke, Ronnie Cowan in the bank. Ronnie Cowan in the bank. Ronnie Cowan. Yeah, I'll tell him I'm looking for it. Don't forget the Heritage House. It'll be open all afternoon. That's in the tent, right up here across the street from Fitzgilchrist's office. The White Horse Patrol following the parade. Don't forget that. Up back of the schoolhouse. The schoolhouse is right up the end of this street. From where I sit, there's lots of activity out on the East Street. Whether they're moving out or not, I don't know. The parade will be starting in about 5 minutes, and the judges just showed up, so it looks like we're going to have some actions. Just getting ready to start from the official messenger. I thought maybe he had a pony, but he doesn't. What kind of a machine is that? Don't forget the horse parade, white horse parade, patrol show, I should say. It's not a parade, it's a show. Up behind the schoolhouse, out on the football field, free of charge. You probably wondered what I was doing up here, so did I. But we are privileged at this time, without a big, long ordeal and so forth. The man to take charge now is our own Greg Lund from Sioux City. Greg, it's all yours. Give him a big hand.
Happy birthday. Come on, let's have some joyful applause here. Let's go. This is a birthday celebration. Now, it's hot today. We don't care. It's better than rain, right? You folks in the shade are lucky. You're smart. My assistant and I, my sister-in-law, Lynn Lund, are going to try to give you the information on the entries and the floats that come by. And we've got our work cut out for us because earlier lists had about 100 and some entries on it, and later lists had a little over 200. We have over 260 entries in this parade today. The parade started about 5 minutes ago, and it will be coming up the street shortly. And we anticipate having a terrific parade. There are entries from all over northwest Iowa and Minnesota and South Dakota, and it should be an excellent day. So sit back and relax and enjoy it.
Announced that the Heritage Village is open at noon up here in the tent. Coin auction is tonight and tomorrow night, even and odd numbers. Even tonight, odd tomorrow.
The Heritage Village show tent will be open at noon today. And the coin auction, even tonight, silver coins tonight and tomorrow, odd, and the 1881. Eloise Stewart keeping us straight here, folks. 7 o'clock. Fine right now. What's this? The floats have not yet been judged. They will be judged as they come by. Winners will be announced later. There are a few awards that we will be able to give you. Some families in Lorenz, the Hakes family, the Gilchrist family, the Hawley family, among others, have been given some awards to floats, and two of them at least have been judged, and we'll be letting you know about them as those floats appear. And here it is. Leading the parade today, familiar faces of the VFW Post 3533, Archibald Southworst of Lorenz, color guard members and the auxiliary. Please rise for the showing of the colors. The State Senior Vice Commander Russ Truax is riding in the car, along with the original charter members riding in the 63 Chevy convertible. Other color guards today, VFW Post 4512, the color guard from Pocahontas, the Pocahontas Legion color guard, the Anderson Eckert Hersom American Legion Post 345 from Mallard, Iowa, and the Adams Post 119 American Legion and Auxiliary color guard. Also today with us, the Sathers Odd Guard VFW Post 5240 and Auxiliary from Dakota City and Humboldt, Iowa. Pearl Harbor Survivors Association coming along a little bit later. Members of this organization were in Hawaii on December 7th, 1941, went through the attack by the Japanese on that date. The organization now has 9,000 members nationwide. Second Vice President Charles Stutzman of Lorenz. And the VFW from Esterville also with us today. Also today we'd like to welcome radio station KEMB with us from Emmitsburg. Lorenz Marathon School Marching Band. Let's give him a big hand. Representatives of the Sioux Rapids VFW, we thank them for their participation today. This is a Circus Calliope coming next, provided music for the merry-go-round dating back to the 1920s. It was restored by Lester Applegate, now owned by Anna Applegate, with the help of their son Eugene Applegate and his family. From Pocahontas. Let's give a big hand to our parade Grand Marshal, Francis Hakes. Entry number 11, called the Surrey with the Fringe on top, Mr. and Mrs. Bud Brugman from Peterson, Iowa. Team is Buck and Buster, driven by Bud, and the Surrey and the horses are owned by David and Bud Brugman. Entry number 13 is the first year that Cadillac made cars. It was in 1903. This one-cylinder car owned by Mr. and Mrs. Ed Sunholm of Albert City and driven by Martin Anderson, accompanied by his wife Gladys. Yvonne and Greg Buffy are from Lorenz. Right behind that, a 1904 Oldsmobile owned by Mr. and Mrs. Ed Sunholm, also of Albert City, and driven by Cliff Johnson and accompanied by his wife Garnett. They're on exhibit, these cars, at the Albert City Museum, open Sunday afternoons, 1:30 to 4, and on Thresherman's Day, August 13th, 14th, and 15th. The Lorenz fire truck, miniature fire truck driven by Jim Harriman, a captain. 1931 antique truck owned by the fireman, driven by Les Miller, assistant chief, I'm told. Is that right, Les? It is. Pete Hansen riding with him. Behind that is the 1953 Jeep owned by the Forestry Department. After that, a 1967 International Rescue Van, of course operated and owned by the town of Lorenz and the surrounding townships. Another International owned by the town of Lorenz, the fire truck. Past that, the red one, International tanker. And following that, a Chevrolet tanker, and then a 1977 Ford pumper, the Lorenz Fire Department. Our next entry is from the Rockwell City Chamber of Commerce. The float is being pulled by a 1956 Lincoln Premier, owned by Marvin Weiss of Rockwell City. Following the Rockwell City entry, Rudy Poppin of Manson, Iowa, driving a 1925 Model T Ford. The Sacred Heart Church of Lorenz's entry. The theme of the float is the family that prays together, stays together. Father Francis, along with 6 parish members, represent the parish as a family. Mass first said in Lorenz in the fall of 1882. Usually in one of the homes. The church was built in 1901 and enlarged in 1938. Entry 20, owned by Joe Lawman, miniature copy of Lincoln Buggy, and occupying it are the mayor and his lady. Restored by Paul Mefford in 1964. Rear seat and springs are the original antiques and are driven by Bruce Imming and assisted by his son Scott. Entry number 21, the Larimer McCabe American Legion Post number 24 of Lorenz. Riding are holders of the Diamond Jubilee Certificate, Fred C. Gilchrist Jr. and George C. Buckwalder. Also riding in the 1972 Cadillac, Neva Buckwalder and Dick DeYoung, the commander. Next entry unknown. This is the Ayrshire Centennial. Let's give Ayrshire a big hand, coming up later on this month. On the float, Prince and Princess of the Ayrshire Centennial, Tony Hyman and Angela Baxter. Centennial July 29th, 30th, and August 1st. Also Ayrshire. Tony Hyman and Angela Baxter on this float right here in front of us. There we go. Number 23 was Shelley Hagberg of Greenville, 1931 Hupmobile, straight 8 convertible. Number 24, King Roy Rubel and Queen Anna Bartley. Let's give them a hand. They represent the Lorenz Congregate Meals and Lorenz Senior Pioneers. They were elected from among the oldest participants. They're riding in a 3-seated mountain wagon from Wyoming, built in 1890. And next, the 1954 Dodge, owned and driven by Tim O'Connor, accompanied by Pocahontas County Recorder Don O'Connor. Iowa State Senator Arnie Waldstein tells us he's running for another term in the Iowa Senate. He says, congratulations, Lorenz. Thank you, Senator. The music you're hearing now is from the American Heritage Ecumenical Singers and Musicians. Go to church. This group continued after originating at our bicentennial celebration 6 years ago. They now number 51 members. And while the chorus is made up only of male voices, the wives do the public relations work as they make their appearances doing the singing for religious services throughout Iowa and at several points in Minnesota, South Dakota, and Nebraska. Music is done in a polka and waltz style and is made up by members of the Catholic, Lutheran, Methodist, and Christian churches of Lorenz and the surrounding area. The ladies and musicians on the float today are representing the various nationalities of the heritage of our groups and appear as people attending a religious service while the chorus leads the singing today. Mr. and Mrs. Jim Cernett are our king and queen of this group today. seldom that you'll see these three gentlemen together. With their special agent, Ron Luxinger, the driver, we have President Ronald Reagan, former President Jimmy Carter, and former President Richard Nixon. Entry number 29 is the Stork family of Odebolt, Iowa. They are driving a 1953 Plymouth convertible, and it's owned and driven by Fred Stork. Coming up next is Simplot Soil Builders for your fertilizer, chemicals, custom applications, soil testing, crop, and soil consulting. From where? In the heart of the Banana Belt. Entry number 31 is a draft pony hitch. Jack Detman, owned by Jack Detman of Sac City, Iowa, and the drivers are Terry and Craig Ferguson of Lorenz. Ponies' names are Bill and Scooter, Billy and Scooter. Ponies placed first in the draft pony hitch class at the Iowa State Fair in 1981. Let's give them a big hand. Here we have Linda Peterson, the 1982 Iowa Beef Queen. Linda's from Spencer. She's the daughter of Lindell and Jackie Peterson, and she'll be a sophomore at Iowa State this fall, majoring in business. 65 Dodge Charger. We went one ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to 33. 1955 Buick Antique, owned by Joe Lawman, has electric windows, antenna, and original interior, driven by Bob Hopkins and Gene Lawman. And next we have a Dodge Charger, 1965. First year the Chargers were made, also owned by Joe Lawman. And a Corvette convertible in 1962, owned by Joe Lawman, driven by Dane Olson. Entry number 36, State Representative Richard Groth, or Groth? Groth. And wife Susan of Albert City. Representative Groth has served in the Lorenz area in the Iowa House for the past 4 years, we're told, and will be seeking your support this November in his bid for re-election to a third term. The car is owned and driven by Phil Sundblad of Albert City. Coming up next is the entry from the Lorenz First Christian Church, and it represents the combined growth of history of Lorenz and its churches, growing together for God and country. Children represent the period in which each church was organized. The banners are hand-painted. 50 church members contributed their time and talents, with over 400 man-hours represented in the production of this float. I saw it. Coming up next, entry number 40. The Drifter and Carriage are owned by Leroy Dumkrieger of Leisure Acres in Cherokee, sponsored by Les Jansen Insurance Company of Lorenz. I don't have a 41. The apples from Curlew. Here we go. We have an unscheduled item in our program. Let's give them a hand for coming down in a 1923 Model T. Entry number 42 is a 1949 Ford from Virgil Prather, 620 West 7th Street in Spencer. Following that is Lloyd and Jean Petticord, I believe it is, from Spencer. 1951 Pontiac, all original, 19,000 miles. Okay. Schubert's is heading for the beach, 1881. Ed and Shelley Benz, Jane Finnestead, owner and driver of the Mules and Wagon, Joan Koenig of Webb, Iowa. Nice day for the beach. The rainbow emblem of the Lorenz Women's Club, as well as the Iowa and General Federations, is the center of interest for the Women's Club float. Club theme of Use the Rainbow Connection joins the past and the future. Pot of Gold contains the wealth of the club and its projects. Lorenz Women's Club, a study club of 40 members. Entry number 45 is a 1957 Bel Air Chevrolet four-door owned by Warren and Ken Johnson of Pocahontas. All original equipment, we're told, is driven by Kent Johnson. Fred and Bev Graves now coming in front of it. Billy Leith there. And his daughter? Tom Grau, running for Iowa Senate. Democratic Senate candidate, I should say. Performing in front of us from Spirit Lake, the Road Runner Motorcycle Club. Started in the Lakes area 4 years ago by 3 couples, and this is now Northwest Iowa's largest touring motorcycle club with a membership of more than 60 families. I'm running out of... okay. Coming down now, the bus. The bus represents the Trinity Lutheran Church of Mallard. The signs on the sides promote the radio and television ministries of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, the Lutheran Hour, and This is the Life. And number 50, the entry 50 following behind the red pickup, is the Trinity Lutheran Church, also from Mallard. Giving everybody a cooling dip on the way down. Folks from the Havelock Fire Department. The red truck, a 1947 International fire truck, and also a Jeep in front. Let's give a hand to the Havelock Fire Department. Oh, okay, yeah. I haven't seen it. Okay. This unit, driven and owned by Paul Kraft, 3 Mules, Maud, and Maggie and Charlie. They're from Newell, Iowa. And in front of us now, you'll see all the way through the parade, the Abu Bakr Shrine Clowns from Sioux City. 1927 Model T, again from the Apple family, a Curlew. Entry number 54 is a 1954 Chevrolet driven by Fred Stevens. Riding shotguns, Jeanette Johnson. First Federal is also started in 1954 and going strong with assets over $225 million. The mayor of Gilmore City, Jim Fradine, driven by Alan and Donna Davis. Knights of Columbus float represents the Father Allers Council number 3140 of Lorenz, as well as the Knights throughout the world, as they too are celebrating 100 years in the organization. It was founded in New Haven, Connecticut in 1881. Entry number 57 is a 1930 Chevrolet Coupe, a 6-cylinder, standard 3-speed transmission, 38,000 actual miles, owned by Ray Wessels of Palmer and driven by Fred Chadwick, owner of Chadwick Chevrolet, 26 years as a Chevrolet dealer in Lorenz. Coming up next is the horse-drawn school, sponsored by the Marathon Action Club. The school bus was built as a replica of the ones used at 1903 to 1925 at the Marathon School. Bus and horses are owned and driven by Vernal and Skip Anderson. As we've told you before, Mallard also celebrating a centennial, and their marching band is here with us today under the direction of Lynn Miller, the Mallard Marching Band. Let's give them a hand. years old and celebrating their centennial July 16th, 17th, and 18th. The Mallard Centennial Royalty King F.N. Happy Clausen and the Queen Loretta Schuler, Prince Ron Ackridge, and Princess Angela Helt. The car is courtesy of Jensvold Motor Company of Esterville. 1955 Packard Clipper is next, and this Packard is owned by Harold Clint of Sioux Rapids. Mr. Clint also owns the 1956 Ford Custom blue and white job that's going in front of us now, driven by Zim Kuykendall of Minneapolis. Back to the days when farming was harder than it is now, 1927 John Deere D, owned by Eldon Johnson of Lorenz. The next entry, owned by David and Linda Adams from Britt, Iowa. Black draft horses. The average weight is over 2,100 pounds. This breed, the Percherons, I believe it is, originated in La Percherie, France. These horses have been in the Rose Bowl Parade and in the Chicago Circus Parade. Let's give them a big hand. Sponsored by the Lorenz State Bank. They're going to give you a show. Look out over here. These horses need some room to turn around. Let's give these folks a big hand. Merle Sorline is next from Bode, and they're driving a 1908 Sears horseless carriage. Clay County Fair is next, reminding us that the fair will come up again this September 11th through the 18th, and of course this is a replica of the front gate entrance of the Clay County Fair. 1982 will be the 65th edition of the Clay County Fair. Elmer Fries of Holstein is next with his pony team and wagon, sponsored by the Jewelry and Gift Shop of Lorenz. '46 V8 Mercury is next, owned by Lloyd and Marguerite Weil of Lorenz. This car was given to them by Marguerite's father, the late Jesse Spencer of Fonda. Entry number 72 is from Albert City. The fire truck from the Albert City Fire Department, a 1924 LaFrance Brockway torpedo fire truck. The Abu Bakr Shrine clowns have arrived. It is time to hold on to your hats. Behind them, the Cherokee Flying Carpets, a unit of the Abu Bakr Shrine Temple in Sioux City, led by Captain Bob Lundquist and Lieutenant Leon Height. Strong spirits, ride so that weak legs may walk, is the motto of this club. Carpets will be giving rides to young children following today's parade. Let's give the Flying Carpets a big hand. Thank you, gentlemen. Abu Bakr Wrecking Crew of Sioux City. After that, Madeline C., the first president of the American Legion Auxiliary of Lorenz. She was the second Pocahontas County president and was district president. Ella Mae Cowan, Hazel Moore, and Minnie Rubel. Nearly 60 years membership, whose husbands were instrumental in building the Legion in Lorenz. The float built by First Vice President Ruby Reese of Lorenz with the help of her family and Lucille Triggs. Jean George, past state chaplain and president of the Lorenz unit. Denise, Faith Ann, Janine, Nikki Jo, junior members of the Lorenz unit on the float. After that, another calliope, a 1925 circus calliope owned by Kurt Stein of Gilmore City, sponsored by the Farmers Co-op Association of Marathon. Entry number 77 is a 1956 Cadillac two-door hardtop, driven by Jay Arnold of Mallard from Arnold's Auction and Real Estate Service. Another Mallard entry, the Mallard Fire Department with a 1937 Ford. Again, the Mallard Centennial, the 16th, 17th, and 18th of July. The Lorenz Methodist Church float, celebrating its 100 years, pulled by John Thummim and his 1943 Minneapolis Moline tractor. The riders are Reverend Max Page and Lester Schultz. The theme of the float is Come Back in the Sun, suggesting God's creation and salvation is through Jesus Christ our Lord. A John Deere 1938B with a 1945 Sill Ball mechanical loader, both purchased new by Harry Thumma and now driven by his son Russell Thumma. Entry number 80, a Welsh pony pulling a buggy driven by Steve Nelson from Meriden, Iowa. Buggy was used for transportation in town by his grandfather when he was a young boy. Buggy's over 70 years old. Sponsored by Sepker Auto, that particular entry. And Smith Funeral Home in Lorenz sponsors this float. Miniature horse team, miniature hearse, pulled by a team of ponies. Ponies are owned by Dr. Nysham of Mallard. The Lorenz Lions Club entry, highlighting their contributions to the summer baseball and softball programs in Lorenz. 83, I got it. Entry number 83, the orange car, is the Olds Gold Fun Car, driven by Erwin Fry of Lorenz. The 1956 Packard Executive, driven by Fred Melone of Newell, Iowa. And the 1956 Studebaker Champion is driven by Chuck Zemke. Saturday Night Live is the theme of number 84, sponsored by Sorensen Hardware and Grau Enterprises, both of Sioux Rapids. Alan Sorensen is in the tub getting clean. Is it cool in there? Lorenz JCs and JCettes, the next entry, number 85. Pickup is decorated to show the community and national support that they do. Entry number 86 is the King and Queen, representing the Plover Centennial. Their king and queen of their Centennial, R.T. Bush and Maudel Arnold. Plover celebrated its 100th birthday last weekend and wishes to say congratulations and happy birthday to Lorenz on its 100th anniversary. Now, the float, along with the car representing the town of Plover on her 100th birthday, is a float depicting her namesake, the Plover bird. Plover, as we said, celebrated her 100th birthday last weekend. Coming up next, the U.S. Army Reserve from the Sac City unit, a staff car and a personnel carrier.
thought I'd throw in that little piece of information.
Entry number 88, Carl and Eileen Gertis of Pomeroy, Iowa. They are driving for the German Mutual Insurance Association of Pomeroy. The John Deere you see coming your way, Robert Litweiler of Pomeroy, Iowa owns this. It is a 1928 GP John Deere and 3-row planter. Next entry is happy birthday to the Lorenz community from Manson Implement Company. GP tractor owned by Manson Implement and driven by Ron Schoon, and Tin Lizzie driven by his daughter Leanne Schoon, also owned by the Manson Implement Company. Clyde McDonough of Shaler, Iowa, a 6-horse hitch and wagon sponsored by Ration Maker Products of Lorenz. Belgian horses. Coming up next, the M&J.R. Hakes float, A Century of Service, the float which depicts the first Hakes grocery business in Lorenz, the G.J. Hakes and Sons General Store, built by Hakes employees Randy Enger and Rosie Gemlin. On the float are 2 local 6th-generation Hakes children, Nancy Hakes, daughter of Tom and Kathy Hakes, and Kelly Hakes, son of Mike and Evelyn Hakes. Let's give this float a nice hand. Entry number 95, a 1926 Model T Ford Runabout. Sponsored by Rich's Body Shop of Lorenz. L.W. Gray is the driver. Coming up next, the green Dr. George's medicine wagon, the way the medicines were brought to many towns years ago by a peddler in a wagon with all the wonderful cures for everything, sponsored by George's Drug Store. Owner of the 1917 Model T is Leo Shorty Gray of Sioux Rapids. Coming up next, led by Tom Pullman, a Lorenz native, members of the Shrine, the Abu Bakr Shrine White Horse Patrol. Let's give Tom a nice hand for coming back home. Along with members of the White Horse Patrol. White Horse Patrol, of course, has performed all over the country, most recently in the Rose Parade in Pasadena, California, last January 1st. Here comes the rest of the unit. One of the only units like this in the United States. This group is scheduled to perform later on today at 2 o'clock on the Lorenz Marathon High School football field. And it's free. Let's give another hand to the White Horse Patrol from Sioux City. This is something the patrol must have picked up in California. Got a couple of minutes break here. If you want to stand up and stretch, now's the time to do it. Jerry, Larry, and Dave Bailey coming down, among others, picking up what's fallen behind. Sponsored by Mather Implement Company. Coming up next, the Lorenz Public Library. Their theme is Discover Another World. Visit the Lorenz Public Library. The writers are Angie Heatland, Amber Heatland, and Troy Rouse. Following the library float, a 1953 Chevrolet Cordell Polberg, candidate for Pocahontas County Treasurer. Entry 101, a 1967 Chevrolet convertible sponsored by Garrity's Garage of Cooper, Iowa. Mr. and Mrs. Earl Chapman of Albuquerque, New Mexico. The 1966 Pontiac convertible is next. Owner DeLoss Garrity of Cooper, and DeLoss is driving the car. Famous Cooper, Iowa. The Lorenz Chamber of Commerce float is next, featuring the beauty of Lorenz. Marathon Fire Department is next. A 4x4 GMC tanker wagon. The Royal Fire Department is next. The Model A fire truck. Coming up next, the Cub Scouts of America Pack 99 from Lorenz. Den leaders riding on the float. Janice Schultz, Janelle Culbertson, Sharon Richardson, and Marlon Thye. Entry 108 right in front of our stand here is the Hackney Society horse. From Dolliver, Iowa, Don Morris driving the horse. Lorenz Good Samaritan Center, our next entry. Their theme still going in a covered wagon, but with more horsepower. Back half of the bus will be decorated to look like a covered wagon, with the front being the bus. Here comes a very special float, Rabbit Gulch neighborhood. The southeast part of town, our Big Rabbit with Bunny's float is the joint effort of more than 40 families from southeast Lorenz. This neighborhood earned its nickname Rabbit Gulch of a couple of decades ago, and it's seen that the population of that area increased more rapidly than it did in other parts of town. People have come from all over to ride on this float. A special guest today, Herky the Hawkeye. Ron and Peg Egerton speeding through. The Lorenz Progressive Club has been aiding the Lorenz educational system since 1922. Country school theme was chosen as a representative of the club's main interest. Today, the Progressive Club still supports school activities like Parents' Night, elementary track meet, Teachers' Tea. They've donated towards the school's gym equipment. We're ringing our bell to announce another 60 years of community service. That float was the winner of the Gilchrist Award for Early Education. Our next entry, miniature calliope pulled by a team of sorrel ponies, Cal Jensen of Armstrong, Iowa, and this float is sponsored by Drs. Olson and Beery. A 1963 Corvair convertible owned and driven by Glenn and Elvira Holtorf of T, South Dakota. Riding with them are nephews Brian and Chad. Our next float has quite a bit of history behind it. This young blonde Belgian hitch is owned by Madsen Farms Incorporated, driven by Carl and Daryl Madsen. It's representing the Runneberg family entry. Hitch is made up of 2-, 3-, and 4-year-old horses. Parade entry is honoring Lawrence Runneberg, a local farmer who was born and lived most of his life on a farm north of Lawrence. Lawrence was run over by one of the first horseless carriages at the July 4th, 1910 celebration in Lawrence. Due to the soft dirt streets, Lawrence lived and is here 72 years later to help Lorenz's celebrate their big birthday. This parade entry is recreating the scene in Dr. Hoviden's office on July 4th of 1910. Lawrence is wearing his father's coat. You'll be able to see that as soon as they make their way down the street. As we say in TV, technical problems. Now we're coming. Lawrence Runneberg is wearing his father's coat, which is approximately 80 years old. Lawrence's daughter, son, and grandchildren and great-grandchildren are riding on the wagon. This hitch is equally at home doing farm work or parading on the streets of Chicago. For the past 2 years, they have been part of the Circus World Memorial Weekend Parade in Chicago. This last year, they pulled a circus wagon with a hippopotamus. Let's give a big hand to Lawrence Runneberg and his family. Next entry, Gilmore City Centennial, is July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Log cabin will be auctioned off at the Centennial time. Mr. and Mrs. Roger Benjamin are riding the float, representing the Lutheran Church. That'll be next year they're celebrating. Iowa Electric Light and Power says happy birthday to Lorenz. Iowa Electric is also celebrating 100 years of service in Iowa. Truck is driven by Phil Griswold and Mark Frank. Followed on the mopeds by Mr. and Mrs. Wayne Woolridge of Cherokee. When you come to the end of a perfect day, you can rest assured if you are insured by Dallenbach. Float presented by Bob, Connie, Shannon, and Stephanie Dallenbaugh, and they're all ready to take their own advice. Coming up next, a 4-horse Belgian hitch pulling a freight wagon owned by John and Bob Roby of Rockwell City, Iowa, sponsored by Unruh's Furniture. Our next entry is from our neighbor Havelock, the town float from the city of Havelock, used for the Havelock Centennial in 1981, last year. Their theme is preserving the past and facing the future. Robinson Pullman Incorporated of Pocahontas, half-century of power. This 1935 Model B, the first year this model was produced by John Deere, it had a whopping 9¼ horsepower. Behind it, a 1929 GP, general purpose, first built in 1928, the first tractor with 4 sources of power. Drawbar for pulling, PTO for mowers and combines, belt pulley, and power lift. And after that, the current, 1982 4440, the latest in the long green line. This is the float that's been put together by neighbors on South Harrison Street, together with the George Hoffmans at the south end of their street. Kids, boats, and fishing. Could be the year. 1881, except for that minibus pulling the vote. How times have changed. Team and wagon in this float is owned and being driven by Carl Bass of DeGraff, Minnesota, formerly of Havelock, sponsored by Jolliffe & Company, Accounting and Tax Service, offices in Lorenz and Cherokee. Riding in the wagon, Dwayne Thompson, Martin Grell, and Bob Jolliffe. They are owner-managers, Lorenz office, Cherokee, and Lorenz again, respectively. Real shredded-up dollars are being used from the First Federal Reserve Bank in Kansas City. In a 1957 Chevrolet convertible are Bill and Jan Patton of Storm Lake. Bill is the candidate for state representative from this area. They're being driven by campaign managers Don and Grace Hertz of Lorenz. This is the Hospital Dads float of the Abu Bakr Shrine in Sioux City, signifying what the shrine does to help crippled children, the many activities that Abu Bakr is involved in the Siouxland area. Vernon Stomp of Holstein, our next entrant. Horses' names are Chester and Kate. He made the wagon himself, we're told. Coast to Coast of Lorenz sponsoring that float. This 1927 Buick Country Coupe we were scheduled to see, owned and driven by Harlan Johnson, purchased from Basil Dale of Humston, Iowa in April of 1977. Body work done by Tom Fisher and Lorenz, upholstery by Herbert Wiley of Lorenz. 1951 Chevy pickup is what we saw, owned by Harlan Johnson again. And behind that, a 1955 four-door sedan Chevrolet, owned by Harlan Johnson as well. From Pocahontas, Princess City of Iowa. Pocahontas, too, founded in 1870, has a proud past and a bright future. This float sponsored by the Pocahontas Chamber of Commerce. This is a pony hitch, the Irish team, Pat and Mike, Einar Apple and daughter Diane of Emmitsburg with us today. This is a replica of the first dime store in Lorenz in 1939, founded by Fred and Ruby Eaton. The front part of that store was sales floor. The back part was living quarters for Fred and Ruby, who are on the float. Let's give them a big hand. This entry is the Pocahontas County Historical Society. The team and wagon is owned and driven by Louis Voss of Fonda. The Eaton float, the Peterson Variety float, won the Lorenz Legacy Award. Our next entry is a Model T Ford, a 1916 Ford touring car owned by Junior and Barb Halverson of Sioux Rapids, driven by Mr. and Mrs. Dennis Halverson and family of Sioux Rapids. Mike Oberding has been with the Pride Seat Court Company for the last 27 years, and Mike will be giving up the seat sales business this fall. Mike's nephew, Lee Bailey, is riding on the float with his wife, Pat, and they'll be taking over Mike's territory with the Pride Company. Team of dark gray 3- and 4-year-old draft horses, owned and driven by Keith McDonough of Rutland, Iowa. Coming up next, the entrant from Mather Implement Company, in business since 1926. Case Cross mounted tractor, owned by Ron Schopp of Little Sioux, Iowa. Bill Mather and Mark Mather driving that float. This is a 1949 Seagraves fire truck from Spencer, one of the 6 trucks used by the Spencer Fire Department. Truck is used as a backup truck. It's equipped with a 750-gallon per minute pump and a 500-gallon water tank, among other things, and a 12-cylinder engine. Stu Mackey, a Lorenz native, resident for a while, is on the back of that truck. He's the chief of the Spencer Fire Department. David and Sue Brugman driving a nip tuck on an antique Surrey from Peterson, Iowa. Sponsored by Lorenz Plumbing. Coming up next from Emmetsburg, Chamber of Commerce float and St. Patrick's with Miss Shamrock, Mary Lynn from Lorenz. Let's give Mary Susie Lynn. Let's give her a big hand. She was crowned Miss Shamrock during the St. Pat's celebration held in March. Next entry is by Howard and Ken DeYoung of Lorenz. A 1918 Altman Taylor steam engine owned by Carl Lind of Albert City, fired by Marlowe Feldman and Carl Lind. Next entry, the Iowa-Minnesota district of the Danish Brotherhood in America. The Danish Brotherhood started in January of 1882. May 1st of this year, they held a Centennial celebration at the Red Lion Hotel in Omaha. This is a representative from Humboldt Lodge number 217, represented in our parade today. Everybody's heard of Christmas in July. Well, they know it's hot, but they thought they'd better give it a try. So they're wishing everybody a Merry Christmas and a joyous Centennial. Chuck Allers is Santa Claus. I bet he's got the air conditioner on in there. Another representative from Ayrshire, the Ayrshire birthday cake, a family float by Dale Loomis. 100 candles on that float, and again, Ayrshire Centennial, July 30th, 31st, and August 1st. Lorenz Country Club sponsoring this float. 1950 DeSoto. Coming up next, a 1930 Model A Ford Coupe, all original, owned and restored by Bill Abbott of Nevada, Iowa, and riding with Bill is his wife, Kathy. Glad to have them here from Nevada. The Plover Powhatan Fire Department is next. It has 20 active members, and it's coming beyond this. Sterling Manufacturing of Lorenz and their livestock trailer, our next entry. Behind that is the Plover Powhatan Fire Department. 2 pumpers and a tanker and 1 newly acquired equipment van. Pumper is a 1975 Ford with a Laverne pump capable of pumping 750 gallons per minute. Sid Erickson and Sterling Muir with us today. A 1959 Nash Metropolitan with us. Robert Johnson of Albert City. Our next entry is sponsored by the Charger Inn. It's a horse and buggy driven by Mr. and Mrs. Richard Baskerville of Jolly, Iowa. Our next entry has some history behind it, of course, from the Buckwalder Construction Company. 3 generations of Buckwalder contractors. John, Melvin, and Bob with us today. This float is from the Hertz family. The Martin Hertz family began farming in the Lorenz area in 1909. His son Amos took over the farming operation and has now passed it on to his son Don. Float contains the walking plow, a double tree, horse harness, collars, and neck yoke used in their early farming operation. Next entry sponsored by Dean Olson, Garson Company, Pioneer Seed Corn Dealer. Parade car was made in 1976 for the big bicentennial by Keith Eberly of Pocahontas. Car is powered by a 3-horsepower Fuller and Johnson gas engine. Martin and Lola Peterson are driving their 1931 Ford two-door. They are from Rolfe. Knights of Columbus Council from Milford was with us. The council is 3 years old and has 65 members. They're very proud of the awards they have won. In 1981, they had Chaplain of the Year for the Sioux City Diocese. Rolfe Lions Club with us today. Their motto, "We serve." Pat Wood. The Lorenz Lions Club was organized, the Rolfe Lions Club, in the early 50s. The 1919 Mitchell is our next entrant, owned by Irvin and Eleanor Rappoon. It has 13,000 miles on it. Congratulations to Lorenz on your birthday, and Morris Behringer is in the car. He's the treasurer of Iowa. His wife, Mr. Behringer's wife, a Lorenz native, the former Dorothy Slenzik. This is Surrey, made by Kretzer Carriage Company in Des Moines, driven by Mervyn Rappoon and accompanied by his wife LaVon, daughter Debbie, and granddaughters Michelle and Beth. The carriage is owned by the Rappoon brothers. The 1962 Studebaker convertible, owned by Irvin and Eleanor Rappoon, and this car started its career as a pace car in the Indianapolis 500. Sponsored by 162 is sponsored by employees of the Farmers Cooperative Elevator of Lorenz. Horse and buggy furnished courtesy of the Blaine Kanabe family. Riding are Mr. and Mrs. Arnold Nelson and their grandchildren. This is a 1936 B John Deere tractor, originally purchased from Bill Rope, a John Deere dealer, by Roy Dexter in 1936, presently owned by Dale Lindstrom and operated by Fred Perkins. The plow on the back is an International. This is a 1957 Olds two-door hardtop owned by Denny Smith of Rembrandt. Special factory-equipped J2 option on the engine. I don't know what that does. Our next entrant is from the Bethany Lutheran Church in Lorenz. It was organized January 27, 1891. The theme of the float is baptism, which is our Christian beginning. The pews on the front of the float are from the present church. The fontan pews on the north end of the float are from the original church. The Bethany Lutheran sign was on the front of the old church, and the current pastor, Julian Swanson. Our next horse units, driving the wagon, Bob Eggerth. The 2-year-old registered Arabian filly has been raised by the Eggerth family of Sway City. Because the filly was born on Easter Sunday, she is registered as Miss Easter Carradine. The other riders in the wagon are Lois and the Eggerth grandchildren, Melanie Gadberry, daughter of Janet, Alan Gadberry, and Jason Thorson, sons of Lori and Claire Thorson. Bob has done all the training of Easter. We have 1954 Pontiac straight-engine Chieftain, 4-door sedan with only 83,000 miles, clean, good tires. Driver and owners Mr. and Mrs. Oscar Sunblad and Mr. and Mrs. Donald Halverson accompanying them. It's a 1965 Ford Galaxy 500, a 2-door hardtop. It's got a few more miles than the previous car, 160,000 miles. Original condition. Sponsored by Speed's Auto Supply and Cookie's Barbecue Sauce of Wall Lake. This team of 2-year-old Clydesdales pulling a high wooden wheeled wagon. The team is owned and driven by Kevin Goodell of Gilmore City. It's sponsored by Hawkeye Harvestor of Humboldt. Peterson Construction Company, Caterpillar, 1980 it says here. This should be a 1940. Adams Grader, purchased by Peterson Brothers, pulled by a 1981 Caterpillar grader. Entry number 173 from Shaw Repair Shop has been given the Early Industry Award by the Hakes family. It's the Hakes Family Award. Old hand tools and wrenches, and it's called Just a Hobby. A 1933 Ford 5-window coupe from Dennis Anderson of Marathon. And a 1950 Ford Crestliner also scheduled to be here. Coming up next, Lorenz Tops Iowa chapter number 60, 21 years of keeping Lorenz slim and trim. Betty Knoll, the 1981 Tops Queen, with a loss of 78 pounds. Raymond Seahusen next with a 1954 Ford pickup, again, an all original. We Need a Club, started in 1939 at Ware, Iowa. They needed a club, they got one. Pocahontas County Mutual Insurance Company float features a giant Indian headdress and 3 live Indians, Bunny Forsyth, Bud Hawley, and Dave Byerly. The Indian motif is appropriate for this concern, which bears the name of the Indian princess, from which our county derived its name and from which the County Mutual Insurance Association derived its name when organized in 1891. The office is with the Hawley Insurance Agency of Lorenz. The Owl's Nest has sponsored Dwayne Lawrence's car, a 1950 Chevrolet. Dwayne's from Spencer. The Lorenz Watanya Club is a service club, and its theme is the service beat in Lorenz. Flatbed covered with grass and daisies, the Watanya emblem at the back, pulled by Eric Buffy on a John Deere tractor, and officers sitting on the float. Sponsored by Don's Foodland of Lorenz, a 1936 Chevy Master Deluxe. Arnie Lind of Ruthven, Iowa, the owner of that automobile. This is a 1938 Ford Romaine Hanson of Esterville. After this, a 1938 Deluxe 2-door Ford. Elvin Stroop of Esterville, the owner of that. Coming up next, the Keepsake Doll Club. Their theme, Storybook Time. 18 members from 4 counties, organized in 1969. They meet once a month, and they make and collect dolls. This car was bought first, entry 187, from the late Earl Dwyer and then from Don Dersham, and had to be completely restored by Ray Sandvik, driving the car today. A 1937 Chevrolet Coupe owned by Mr. and Mrs. B.T. Nygar of Bode, Iowa. And good old home cooking done by all the Buckwalders. This float coming from Babs Catering in Lorenz. And the next entry, the Municipal Light Plant, went into operation September 12, 1949 in Lorenz. The Lorenz Saddle Club has been a part of Lorenz history. It was started on May 7th, 1948. The banner